And in this case, the bondholders, even in AIB and Bank of Ireland, should be contributing somewhat to the 17.5 billion that's needed for those two. I'm sorry, there's a billion in there for EBS. And in the case of Anglo, we know that there's about 2.1 billion remaining subordinated debt. Of course, that should be written down 100%. Of course. There's no discussion about it. The fact that the bondholders in Anglo sold back their bonds to the bank shows that they expect to get nothing back. So it's absurd that they should be holding on to this mirage. And the second thing, the senior bondholders in Anglo-Irish Bank, and the law shows that creditors in the shape of senior bondholders and deposit holders share pari passu in a liquidation. I'm saying that this is such an unusual situation now that the government should have the courage and the truth to say that the temporary blanket guarantee that saved them nearly 2 years of delay in taking any pain should now be withdrawn, and that they should be sat down in the overall decision of what to do with Anglo-Irish Bank. And in the case of Anglo-Irish Bank, it's simple, again on one page. It's not going to change by allowing the disease to remain latent in the corpse, this terminal disease. If there is a residual portfolio of 12 billion on the balance sheet of Anglo-Irish Bank, sell it. Sell it to some other, sizable property fund, and let them take it over and cash in that and wind up the rest. But to be creating this nonsense of, a vehicle shifting 36 billion of really bad loans into NAMA, that's us, the taxpayer, with still no certainty, there'll never be certainty of what it will realise, and doubling the cost of that realisations and recoveries doesn't make sense. Because the absurdity is this, that the board of directors, the chairman and the managing director of Anglo-Irish Bank and their finance director who is here, their staffs have NAMA divisions who are doing NAMA work by way of subcontract or by way of receiving the instructions back of what to do. It's absurd, the whole thing. And both the NAMA divisions of Anglo-Irish Bank, well, they're off-site, they're off-premises, but they're doing the work. They're receiving professional advices from solicitors and valuers and so on, as are the remaining, portfolios in the...
So what would you advise, Peter?
Close Anglo down, and everybody who's done the honest sums would do that too.
And what about the argument that's been put forward by Anglo that effectively they're saying that it'll cost them another 8 billion and 2.5 billion to get a good bank going, and if you were to close it down in the morning you'd have fire sales and they'd lose further funds. That may not be my views, but that's the views put forward earlier by Anglo.
Well, history and experience don't support that at all. They said that at the end of 2009, when they were producing the 2008 accounts and the 2009 accounts, the market was falling, and that's why they didn't make the provisions that they should have made. Anybody who had learned from the experience of the 1980s in property lending would have known that provisions should have been ramped right up. I told Maurice Keane, one of the directors, in Christmas 2008, that the loan losses across the banking sector would be not less than 50 billion. 50 billion.
One thing there, Peter, as you heard Alan Jukes, when he was speaking there, said that the methodology, say, of yours and maybe other people as well, on...
I'm a chartered accountant, Chairman. Yeah. Right. No, I'm a chartered accountant, Chairman. And I know this. He
was saying it was based on historical behaviour of our system, but that's going where we are today is in a different ballgame.
Oh, I want to take up that remark. He's wrong there. He said that we're in an unusually tight liquidity situation which prevents the alternatives that people suggested for NAMA. Wrong. Because if you capitalise a bank, and the Americans, I'd like the chairman of Anglo-Irish Bank to read Hank Paulson's book On the Brink. this is worthy of mention. There's Hank Paulson's book on the brink. He was the Treasury Secretary in the United States. They brought forward the TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program bill, on the basis that they would buy the toxic assets off the banks. The Treasury.
Was he not Goldman Sachs, was he?
Pardon?
Was he Goldman Sachs?
He was in previous years, yeah.
We have a problem here in that we have a vote. We're sorry about this, Peter. We're caught.
Yeah. But
the thing of what I was going to say is this. The Americans realized, this is an important point, they realized that buying toxic assets was the most impracticable and most costly and most inefficient way to deal with the problem, which was a solvency and a liquidity problem. It was both. And that by injecting the right amount of capital and buying no toxic assets, instead using it, which they did, they gave the 9 biggest banks in the United States no discussion, 125 billion. You have a multiplier effect. Fergal.
Yeah.
Sorry, you've got a multiplier effect of 10 times when you put in capital.
Could I make a suggestion, Chairman? That we're both cut for time in terms of votes.
Yeah.
Would it be possible maybe at a later stage that Mr. Mathews could look at maybe the Anglo situation as it moves on?
I'd like to go over all the points that were brought forward and help the committee to understand them.
Leave that with you, Chairman.
You've made some very good contributions there now today and alternative views, which I think is very important.
Well, the truth is very important, Chairman. Yeah.
So what we can do with what you've...
Sorry, one other thing too, Fergal. This is important. I won't catch you guys again. You know, Patrick Honohan says, and he's an overarching duty as part of being governor, which is to support government policy. You can do nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, when he says, people ask him, and they say, Senator or Governor Honan, what do you think of the current way we're addressing the problem? And he says, well, I think NAM is viable. That's not saying I think it's good, and I don't believe he thinks it's good, because the alternative is what the Americans have done has been far more efficient, and they did it 19 months ago. They got capital into the banks, which then gives you a 10-fold multiplier strengthening effect to your balances in the banks.
Adding to the reserves of the banks rather than an
Which means temporary nationalisation. But so what? It doesn't matter who owns the banks. It's getting the capital in.
Yeah. You know what you've given us sufficient items there for thought and for report that we can submit to the Minister for Finance. But I think what might be helpful too is if you have further ideas and submit it into the clerk, and that we can enclose, you know, your views on the presentations that were made by Regling and Watson and by Professor
Michael, can I just say this? Regling and Watson stepped out of this room and the microphones were stuck in front of them. And they said, you know, ask questions. And they said, you know, Ireland isn't destroyed. It hasn't been destruction. You know, life is going on, so don't be down. That was the first thing. And you would do that, wouldn't you, after you've given a report and you're going home? I'd do it. You don't want to leave it. But they went further, and the journalist said that they think that the government has made a good job of things since the crisis. Now, that was unqualified, unfounded. We don't know on what basis they said that. They don't know, had anything else been discussed. It was outside their remit. Their specific remit was only to...
Unfortunately, we're going to be cut off because there's another committee going in. But if you submit your views and those comments, we take them into regard and submit them to
Well, I think that you guys actually got 2 hours of meaningless information there. For instance, and I mean that.
Oh, yeah, well, we appreciate
they said the 22 billion, and I want to ask them a question. 22 billion is not the extent of the losses under their scheme. It's going to be 32 billion. And you know why? There's 10 billion more to come out of the 36 billion that they're retaining, which is a mixture of 12 and 24. The 24, they've admitted themselves, nobody's read the accounts, has a 60% non-performance level and provisioning level.
So we look forward to your...
just get me onto the thing again, please.
Very good. So I'd like to thank you for coming, and pity that we had a bit longer with you. But as there is no other business, I declare that the meeting is adjourned this evening.